Hello everyone and welcome back to another video, and today we are going to be doing the tip calculator challenge from Frontend Mentor. So if you go into frontendmentor.io/challenges, you can come to this search input and you can search for tip calculator app, and this is the challenge that we're going to be doing. So simply open it up and then go into the download assets tab right here, and then you can download the starter files, and it's going to download this zip folder for you, which you can simply go ahead and extract, and it's going to extract into this folder. So what I want to do is I want to simply delete this, and then I'm going to open up my terminal because we're going to be building this using Next.js, and I'm going to cd into my desktop and then into a folder that is called projects, and then inside projects I want to go ahead and create a new Next.js application, but I want to use a template that I created specifically for Next.js. So if you go into my GitHub profile, the repository is called next15-starter, and it is a public template. So you can use this to canvas code whenever you want to begin a new project. And the gist about this template repository is that it has the dependencies that I usually use for almost all the applications that I build. So for example, it has a .prettier.rc file, which incorporates the Prettier plugin dependency, which is basically used to just format Tailwind CSS classes. And then if you go ahead and check the package.json file, you will find that there are a few dependencies installed here, so such as class variance authority, we have CLSX, we have Lucid React, and all these three are coming from shardcn. Now shardcn is also another thing that is installed in this repository, and shardcn is basically a component library, so you can use it to install components into your application just to beautify your application and to easen up the styling process. And so that is basically the gist of this template repository, so we are going to use it. So simply go ahead and back into your terminal. You can say pnpx, so I want to use pnpx, so pnpx create-next-app, and you can use npx or ban or yarn depending on the one that you're comfortable with. And then I'm going to say --example, and then I'm going to open up my double quotes here and pass in the link to the template repository. So https://github.com/my name, and then the repository is called next15-starter, and then the name of application is going to be tip-calculator, and then this can run. And as it is running, I want to talk about the code editor that we're going to use. Now you don't have to use it, but it is just simply something that I've been trying out and I've really enjoyed it. So the code editor that I'm going to use in this project is called Z. So simply if you go ahead into z.dev, you can read more about it, but it is a new code editor as far as I can tell, but it is very fast. That is what I like about it. And it behaves kind of like VS Code, but it doesn't have all the functionality yet because it's new on the market. And so what they do is they're constantly releasing updates for it. So you can go ahead and download it if you want. It is only available for macOS and Linux currently, but you can go ahead and build the Windows. They have in the docs, they have instructions on how you can build it for Windows. But like I said, you don't have to use this. Okay, so for example, if you're watching this on Windows and you want to build this application, you can simply go ahead and use the code editor that you are comfortable with. But I already have Z installed, so that is what I'm going to use. Now this has finished running, so I'm simply going to say Z tip-calculator. That is going to open up an instance of my code editor into the newly created Next.js application right there. So let it open up. And there we go. So this is Z. Looks very, very nice, and you can use commands that you usually use in VS Code. So for example, Ctrl+J is going to open up your terminal, Ctrl+P is going to open up the command palette, rather not the command palette really, but you can search for files using Ctrl+P, and then Ctrl+Shift+P is going to open up the command palette. So basically, if you're used to using VS Code, then most likely the commands that you use in the VS Code are also going to work inside here. Now, because we are building the tip calculator, actually the first thing that we need to do is copy our files. So I can now close my terminal, and then I can go back into the tip calculator right here. And what I'm going to do is simply this. I'm going to grab the design and the images, drag and drop them into the public folder. And then I'm going to grab the index.html, the preview, the readmes except the git ignore, and then drag and drop them inside here. And is that the correct path? Should be inside the application right there. Did it copy? Okay, replace. Okay, there we go. And then for the git ignore, I want to open this up because we want to do a bit of copying and pasting. So let me select all this, just copy it. And then now inside the git ignore, inside our application right here, I'm going to go ahead into the bottom, and you can simply dismiss this, or you can install it if you want. I feel like installing this, so let me just say yes, install. It's probably going to add something like syntax highlighting or something like that. Yeah, I think that's better. And then on the bottom of this, just paste in the previous git ignore. And you can leave everything as it is, but it is safe to remove this part right here, because when you canvas a new Next.js application, those files are already ignored right there. So now you can save that, and then Ctrl J to open up your terminal. And inside our application, if you take a look at how our application looks like by opening the preview, you can see that we are going to be working with a few components. So I want to go ahead and install some components from shardcn, such as the label, the inputs, and the buttons. And those are basically the components that we are going to need. So pnpx shardcn add label, input, okay, spell label correctly, input, and button. Now, if you've never used shardcn before, that's okay. You can simply go ahead into the shardcn website and read more about it. It is basically a component library. So it's very easy to install. And like I said, with this repository, with the template repository, shardcn is already installed. So we can close this, and then now we can close our terminal as well. And then what we're going to do is inside our app folder, we're going to go into the page.js file, and we're going to remove everything inside here. So basically remove that. And then we're going to return a div because we want to build out the UI first. This div is going to have a class name here, and the class name is going to be flex min height screen flex dash column items dash center, okay, center justify dash center, and bg till dash 100. And actually, let me zoom in. I just realized for the purposes of the video, and I wish they would also zoom in, like I wish that when I zoomed in this, it would also zoom in the sidebar like it does in VS Code, but I guess that is one of the functionalities that they are also going to incorporate soon. So we can safely close the sidebar because I don't think we are going to be using anything else inside here. But we can now continue building this out. And did I run the application? Okay, this was installing. So let's say pnpm dev, which is going to open up our dev server on localhost 3000. And then as that is opening up, we can continue to build out our application. And just to mention it once again, what we are building is the preview.png. So basically this, we are just building up the homepage, the UI first, and then we're going to incorporate the functionality. So if you don't see me referencing this file too much, don't worry about it, because I built up the UI beforehand and I also added in the functionality. So I'm building it from memory, but if you're watching the video, you can pause the video to check how your application looks like. So inside here, we're going to have an image, and this image is going to have a source of, and let's see actually where is it. It should be inside the public folder, inside the images, and then the logo. So we are going /images/logo.svg, and then right on the image here, you can say Control Spacebar, and then make sure that you select this one that is coming from next image so that it auto imports the image for you. Now this image is going to have an alt attribute called splitter because that is the name of the application. The width is going to be 400. Height is going to be 400, and it's going to have some class names here. So margin bottom of 10, and then width of 20, and then object dash cover so that it looks nice. And then below this image, we're going to have a div, And inside this div, we're going to have another div with some class names. So this div is going to have a class name here, and the class name is going to be grid width dash full, max width dash 4xl, grid dash columns dash 1, and then give it a gap of 6, and then rounded dash 2xl, give it a bg of white, padding all round of 6, text neutral dash 900, and then shadow dash large. And then on medium screens, we're going to say grid dash columns dash 2. And something else that I feel is worth mentioning is this: we are using Tailwind CSS for the styling. And so if you've never worked with Tailwind CSS, I think these classes are simple enough where they're easy to understand. For example, if I say grid, then you know that we are using display grid. Width dash full is full width, so 100 viewport widths. Max width of 4xl. So right here is where it might just be a bit tricky, because this is dependent on your settings. So if I hover over this, you can see that 4xl with the Tailwind CSS specifications is 56 rem or 896 pixels. But you can change this up in your Tailwind config file. So Tailwind CSS is quite easy to learn. But once again, if you don't want to use Tailwind CSS and you want to use CSS, or rather you want to use your own CSS file, then you can simply go ahead into the globals.css file right here, and then remove all this and then just type in your CSS. It's still okay. Now inside this div, we're going to have another div with the class name here of space dash y dash 6, and then inside this div, we're going to have our label, which is coming from shadcn. So make sure that you import art components UI label. So this one right here. And this label is going to have an HTML4 of bill. So this is going to be the bill. And then it's going to have the class name here of margin bottom of 2, inline dash block, inline block text till 800. And another thing that I feel I should mention is that this application is not going to be a one-to-one replica of the challenge from Frontend Mentor, because what I feel is usually the purpose of these challenges is to incorporate the functionality, but the UI is all going to depend on you. So even if you want to change up the colors or the widths or whatever, then you can simply go ahead and change them. So the label here is going to have a text that says bill, and then inside this label, rather below it, we are going to have an input, which is once again coming from add components UI input. And by the way, all these are built into Z, so I have not installed any extensions. So even if I hover over these classes, such as the Tailwind CSS classes, there's no extension that I've installed. It's simply built into Z. So the input here is going to have a class name. Sorry, let's start with the ID. So it's going to have an ID of bill so that it references the label. And then the type of this is going to be number. The placeholder is going to be $0, and then the value for this is going to be coming from a state value that we're going to create, which is called bill. And then the on change for this on change is going to be calling our synthetic event of e, where we're going to say set bill. So set bill into e.target.value, so that whenever the user types inside the input, then it's also going to update our state value. And then this is going to have a class name here. So class name of order till -100, bg till -50, not 500, text till 800. And then on focus, so on focus, it's going to have a ring of 2. Focus is a full colon, then ring -2. And then on focus, the ring is going to be till -200. And then on large screens, we want to increase the height of the input to 10 so that it's just a bit larger. And then on large screens, the text is also going to be large. Now we can save this, but our application is going to crash. So let's not do that. Instead, let's go to the top and let's mark this file as use client, because we want to add some state values using the use state hook. So right here, we can go ahead and add the bill. So const bill and set bill is equal to use state, and by default, it's going to be 0. And you know what, let's not give it 0, let's just give it an empty string. Now we can go ahead and save that, and when we save that, okay, took a while to save, then we can open up our application on localhost 3000. We can reload this, and we can safely close this as well, and this one too. Now let's just wait for this to reload, and we will be able to see the outline of our application. Okay, so use state is not defined because I forgot to import it. So right here, control spacebar and then say enter, which is going to auto import it. Save it again, and now we should see our application right there. Fantastic. Now I'm going to place this to the right and this to the left, so that when we make changes in our code editor, then we're simply going to be able to see the changes immediately without having to switch the screens. So take this right there. Okay. Now something that I realized I did not do, because this spacing is a bit weird. So that means that the label and the input, I'm going to cut this out and place them inside an article, so that now when I save it, then it's going to be spaced properly. And then I'm going to go below this article and add another article. And then this article is going to have the same structure. So it's going to have a label. HTML4 is going to be equal to the tip, and the class name here, the class names are going to be similar to the labels, or rather the label that we already built on top. So basically this, copy and paste it here. And then the text for this is going to say select tip. So select tip, and then the percentage sign. So select tip percentage. And then below the label, we're going to have a div, and this div is going to have some class names here. So class name is equal to grid dash columns dash 3, and I give it a gap of 2. So this is going to be our button grid. And then close it out. And then inside this div, we're going to map over some elements. So we're simply going to write them out. So we know that it should be an array, so that we can use the map method. So one of the tips is going to be 5%, and then 10%, and then 15%, and then 25%, and then 50%. And then we can say dot map. And then for every value that we get back, meaning one of these values, then we want to go ahead and render out a button. So an arrow function here, and then we can write an implicit return. We're going to render out a button, once again coming from components UI button. And the button here is going to have a key of value. And then when you click on this button, we're going to be calling a function here. And this function is going to say set tip. So set tip into the value. So one of these that we click on. And then you can close this, and this button is going to have some class names here, and the class names are going to be dynamic. So add in your curly brackets, and then your what's it called, your backticks, and then $ curly brackets again, where we're going to say that when the tip is equal to the value, when this is true, then the button is going to have a BG of til-400, and then when it is false, and what am I doing here, needs a closing quotation, yes, and then when it is false, then it's going to have a BG til-800. And then outside of this, we're going to say that on hover, then the BG is going to be til-600, just like that. And then inside here, we're going to pass in the value. So one of the values that we get back, and then add in a percentage sign. Now we can save that, but it's going to break. So let's not do that yet. Instead, let's go back to the top. Let's create our second state value. So const tip and set tip is equal to use state, and by default it's going to be 0. Now we can save that, and our application is going to reload, and there we go. So basically these buttons are what we have created right here. And now when you click on them, then it should update the tip value, and you can see that we are adding a check here. We are checking whether the tip is equal to the value of the button that we click on, and then we are applying this style right here. That's why you can see that the active button is just a bit lighter. So that's already looking very, very nice. So now we're going to go below this right here. We're going to have an input. So input with an ID of tip, and then it's going to have a type of number, and then the placeholder. So placeholder is equal to custom. There's going to be a custom input for the tip. The value is going to be custom tip. So custom tip, which we don't have yet. And then on change, we're going to go ahead and do this. We're going to call our synthetic event of e, and then add in our function right here. We're going to say set custom tip into e.target.value, so depending on what we type in, and then we're going to say set tip into e.target.value, just like that. And then let's remember to close out the input right there. And then the input here is going to have the same class names as this one, so you can just simply copy this because it's easier, and then just paste them here. And then we can save that, but don't save it yet because we don't have our state values. So we're going to go back to the top. We're going to say const custom tip. So custom tip set custom tip is equal to use state, and by default it's going to be an empty string. Now we can save that, and now we should see the custom input right there. Fantastic. Now we're going to go below this article. We're going to have another article with the same structure. So label, first of all, the label is going to have an HTML4 of people, and then the class name, we can just copy the class names from the top, but they are little, so you can type them out. So margin bottom of 2, inline block text till 800, and then the text is going to say number of people. And then below this label, we're going to have an input with a type of number, and then it's going to have an ID of people. Then the placeholder is going to be 0, and then on change, sorry, the value first of all, so the value is going to be people, and then on change, we're going to go ahead and say set people into e.target.value, and make sure that you get the e event right here. And then we can give it some class names with, let's copy these class names because these are quite a bit, and it's basically the same class name. So right here, paste it in, and then close out the input. Looking nice. Now let's go ahead and create the state value. So once again, back on the top, we're going to go ahead and say const people set people is equal to use state. By default is going to be an empty string. Now once we do that, then we can go all the way to the bottom. We can go outside of this article, and then outside of this div, we're going to go ahead and create another div with class names here of flex dash column, justify dash between, rounded dash xl, bg till dash 800, padding all round of 6, and then text till dash 400. Close that out. And then inside here, we're going to have another div with the class names here of space dash y dash 6. Close it out. And then inside this div, we're going to have an article, and this article is going to have some class names here of flex items dash center, justify dash between. And then inside this article, we're going to have a paragraph here with class name text dash large, font dash semi bold, and then text dash white. Close it out. And then this paragraph is going to say tip amount, so tip amount, like so. And then inside this paragraph, we're going to have a span, like so. This span is going to have a class name of block text extra small, so XS, and then text till dash 400. And then this span is going to say /, so / person, meaning per person. Now we can save that so that we see what we are building out, and there we go. So this is basically what we have built out. And now we're going to do the same thing. So we can simply copy this article, copy, and then paste it down one more time. And then this is now going to go ahead and say total, and this is going to remain to say per person, so total per person. So if I save that, we should now have total per person. Now another thing that we should add, which I have not added, is right below this paragraph that says tip amount, we're going to go ahead and have another paragraph with class names here of text dash 3xl, and then font dash bold, and then we can close that out. And then this is going to say $, and then open up your curly brackets, tip amount dot to fixed, so that we get it to 2 decimal places. So pass in 2, like so. Now we don't have this yet, so actually wait, do we have that as a state value? No, we don't. So we need to calculate it. So if you save your application right now, it's going to break. So don't do that yet. And then below this paragraph, we're going to have something similar. So a paragraph with class name, class names, text-3xl, font-bold, close it out, and then we can go ahead and say $, open up your curly brackets, and then this is going to say total per person dot to fixed, so that we get it to the nearest 2 decimal places, like so. Now below the article and below the div, we're going to have a button here. The button is going to have a class name of margin top of 6, and make sure that it is the button the capital B if you're using TsbSankara. If you're not using TsbSankara, then you can go ahead and build out your own custom button. So margin top of 2 with dash full bg till dash 700, and then on hover bg till dash 600. And did we import this right here, control spacebar? I think we did. Okay. And then when you click on this button, so on click, we're going to call a function that is called handle reset, which we don't have yet. So don't save it again because it's going to break application. And the text for the button is going to say reset in capital letters. Now we can begin to add in our functionality. So basically back on the top right here, we can go below our state values, and then we can go ahead and calculate the tip amount. So const tip amount is equal to, we're going to be checking whether the bill and the people exist, meaning if the bill state value is not an empty string and the people state value is also not an empty string, and then when this evaluates to true, then we're going to open up our brackets, and then we're going to say get the bill and multiply it by, and then open up another set of brackets. We want to get the tip amount divided by 100 so that we get it in percentage form, and then outside of this we want to divide by the people. So just some basic mathematics, and then if one of this evaluates to false, or rather if this expression right here evaluates to false, then we simply want to return 0. And what's the issue here? What's the issue? Oh, okay. It needs to be outside of this, divided by people, and then or 0. So semi, or rather full colon, and then 0, and then const total per person is equal to, we want to check again if the bill as well as the people state value has been populated. If that is true, we want to get the bill divided by the number of people, and then add in the tip amount which I've just calculated above. And then if the expression is false, then we just want to return 0. And then we want to create our function to handle reset. So const handle reset is equal to an inline function, or an arrow function. Why do we keep saying inline even in previous videos? So we want to simply reset our state value. So set bill back to an empty string, and then set tip back to 0, and then set custom tip back to an empty string, and then set people back to an empty string. Now you can save that, and now we should be able to preview our application. So you can see what we built. Very nice. And this is how it looks like on large screens, because we added the grid somewhere. We added the grid. Where did we add grid? I can't even find it, but we added grid, as you can tell. Now if we try to change this value, so if you say the bill is like 500, then we can select a custom tip of 5%, and then we can say that the number of people is maybe 3, and look at that. So we already get the tip amount, we get the total that every person should pay, so that it reaches the bill of 500 as well as get the 5% tip. And if you don't want to give a 5% tip, maybe a 10% tip, just select it and it updates the value. If you select 15%, it updates the value. And then if you want to say maybe you want to give a 75% tip, so you add a custom tip 75, and it calculates that as well for you. So I think that is the entire functionality of the application. Perhaps we should just change the title. So Control B to open up your layout.js file, and then inside here you can simply go ahead and say Frontend Mentor Challenge, and then at the beginning of this you can say tip calculator app, and then add a pipe there. Then you can select this text, select it, and then copy it and paste it inside the description as well. So save that. And oh, you know what, I just realized The font is wrong. The font is wrong. I just realized. That's it. Yeah, the font is wrong. I don't know what font they use. They should use something like Space Grotesque or Grotesque according to what I've just seen. Let's check the style guide. What font? So Space Mono. Okay, so let's go ahead into our layout. So inside the app, inside the layout, okay. Let's go ahead and we can remove this because we're not using this font. And then we can remove this as well. So what we need to do is we need to go ahead and get the Space Mono font. So let's go ahead and import space. Is it called space underscore mono from next-font-google? And then right here we're going to say const font is equal to space underscore mono. I don't know whether that font exists on Google, or then not really on Google, but like on this package that Next.js has. So space mono, does it really? It should. I mean, we're going to find out anyway, so let's just use it. So space underscore mono, and then open up an object here, and then we're going to say that the subsets that we're going to use, so subsets, we're going to pass in inside an array here Latin, and then outside of this we're going to pass in the weights, and we want to use the weights of 400 and 600. And then once we do that, then now we can go ahead right here, and actually we can remove, yeah, we should be able to remove this without any issues, so that we can now say $ curly brackets font dot class name. And then let's save that. Let's see whether our application crashes. Okay, so that font, wait a minute, missing weight for space. Also, it doesn't have the 600 weight, so let's use 700. And then reload the application. Missing weight 400 and 700. I mean, those are the weights that I have, right? Weights, subsets weights. What error is this? Available weights 400 and 700. That's what I have inside here, right? Let's do this. Let me select that. Let's change this to space underscore grotesque. This one. Oops. Don't mistype it. So that we can use the 400 and 600. I think that one has it. Let me see. Perhaps if I change the font, then this error should go away. Okay, there we go. So I guess let's use this font. I mean, like I said, the UI doesn't really matter that much as long as you can get the functionality. But of course, once again, the UI does matter. So you can disregard what I just said. The UI does matter. If you can make it to look good, very nice. But if you understand the functionality and then you can put it together with the UI, then you're in a much better position. So that is going to be the end. If you want access to the code that we've just written, simply go into my GitHub profile. And in my GitHub profile, you can open up the repositories tab right here. And you should be able to find tip calculator app. So this one right here, you can open it up. And then when you open it up, you're going to have access to the code that I've written inside the app folder and inside the page.js. So now let's go ahead and submit this. So let's copy this link. Open up Frontend Mentor, let's say submit solution, and then inside here the solution title is going to be mobile fast tip calculator app, and then the repository URL, we have just copied it, and then we need to deploy this. So let me open up Netlify. So app.netlify/sites should be okay. Or user not found, back to home. Okay, there we go. And then inside here, we can say add new site, import an existing project from GitHub. And then inside here, you can search for tip calculator. Enter. What? No repository is found. Tip. Let's search for tip. There we go. So we can get this one. And wait. What did I select? Tip calculator. Okay, that's the correct one. and then we don't have any environment variables, so we don't need to do that. So deploy, and then as that is deploying, so deploying, there we go. Now we can go into site configuration. We can change the site name. So change site name, change this into whatever you want. I'm going to change it into TsbSankara/tip-calculator so that I can remember it. So tip calculator, like so, save it. And then let's just wait for it to deploy. And there we go. So now we can open this up and we should be able to see our application. Fantastic. Now we're going to copy this link and paste it here as a live site URL. And wait a minute. Did you actually test this for mobile? Oh, we should have tested it. We should have. Okay, let me reduce the font size a bit. I think it's a bit too large for me now. I think this should still be visible in the video. A bit too small. Now let's do this. We don't have. Let's add some what's it called? Let's have some padding on the x-axis of 4. Padding on the x. Save it. Does that push inwards? Yeah, that's better. So basically some padding on the x. Okay, fantastic. So you can add that in, but then once again the repository is already deployed. Now we can go ahead and say in next.js right there, and then we can go right to the bottom and say submit solution. And just like that, we have finished the challenge. So I think in the next video, there's another challenge that I want to go ahead and do. I think it's called the mortgage calculator. Yeah, this one right here. So in the next Frontend Mentor challenge, then this is the application that we are going to build. And I hope you're excited about it, because I will see you in the next one. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe as well. Bye-bye.